All right, welcome to our first anatomy lesson. So, anatomy is the study of the human body, or really just this guy or girl over here. So, if you think about it, what the human body is, well, we have some skin on the outside, then we have some bones, we have some muscle, we have arteries and veins that carry blood, we have organs that do all sorts of cool things, we have a variety of different tissues, we have nerves, and we have many, many other things. So, really, anatomy is kind of the study of all of these things in our body. But today we're just going to focus on one topic. We're going to talk about nerves. And typically when you begin anatomy, you're given a list of nerves that you have to memorize and memorize what they do. But I think before you even do that, a really good idea is to just understand what a nerve truly is, because that's going to make life a lot easier. So the way I like to think about it is that a nerve is a physical thing that transmits information, that transmits information. All right, and I know what you're thinking. Wow, that is quite possibly the most vague definition someone could give, right? A physical thing that transmits information. So let's break this down a bit, okay? So let's first talk about this first part I wrote, a physical thing. So a nerve literally is this physical thing in our bodies that we can touch and see with the naked eye. Um, and it's like a wire. That's kind of the best way to describe it. It's this wire that transmits information from one part of the body to another part of the body. And when I was first learning about nerves, I couldn't conceptualize it. I thought it was some sort of mysterious chemicals that were just floating around. But no, it really is this physical wire. And on the right side, right here, we can see that here's a real human cadaver, and this is a real human nerve right here. It's literally a wire that's connecting two parts of our body, and we have another nerve here and another nerve here, etc. Okay, so this is pretty cool, right? Like in our bodies, we just have a bunch of wires that kind of keep us connected together. So that's kind of the first point we want to clarify. The second thing is that it transmits information. So again, sort of a broad term, right? What do we mean by information? So let's break that down a bit. So if I'm a nerve, I can transmit information. And the first question you want to ask is, right, what type of information can I transmit? So there's actually two types of information, okay? The first is, we call it a sensory information, okay? You're able to sense different things that happen in your body, and we'll touch on this a little bit more. Another type of information is you can tell something to move, so we call that a motor information. So we can sense things and we can tell things to move. That's sort of the what aspect. The second question you want to ask yourself is, who can we send this information to, right? So again, let's break this down further. Who can we send this information to? And in fact, let's look on the left side here, right? Maybe this can help us. So the first sort of family we can send this information to is we can send it to skin, we can send it to our joints, we can send it to bones, and we can send it to our skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle. All right. All right. And the second sort of group of family that we can send it to is we can send it to our organs. We can send it to our smooth muscle, and we can send it to our glands. Okay, so we kind of group it in these families. So this first family here, this family, the skin, the joints, the bones, and the skeletal muscle, we call this somatic. So whenever you hear this term somatic, we're talking about this sort of group right here. And when you see this group, organs, smooth muscle, and glands, we're talking about visceral. Okay? And before we even do examples of this, let's just finish this chart here. So what about motor? Same thing. You can tell the somatic family to move, and you can tell the visceral family to move. So I think right now it's a little overly conceptual. So I think the best thing is let's throw in some specific examples of each of these, because I think that'll help make sense of all this. So what is an example of a sensory information from one of these groups? So let's talk about skin, right? If someone touches me, that's going to give a sensory information to my brain saying, hey, someone touched you. Either do something about that or not, but at least you know about it. So that would be a somatosensory input if someone touched me on my skin. So I think, that's generally a pretty obvious example. But what used to really confuse me was something like skeletal muscle, right? Like no one's gonna poke me on my skeletal muscle directly, right? Um, so why does skeletal muscle have this? How does that even work? The sensory input, and a good way to think about it is something like this, right? Let's say you have a giant tumor growing in your body, and it grows so big that it accidentally, bumps into one of your skeletal muscles. Then your skeletal muscle can send again that sensory input back to your brain, saying, "Hey, brain, something's touching me. I'm not really sure what it is, but perhaps you want to look into it." And you might feel some pain associated with that or some other symptoms, and that could be a good thing. That could be a good sensory thing you're feeling, because it's warning you, hey, something's poking me and it shouldn't. All right, so hopefully this group kind of makes more sense. What about this group, right? What about a visceral sensory input? What's an example of a visceral sensory input? We can say the same thing, right? You have a giant tumor growing, and it accidentally bumps into one of your organs. That would send a visceral sensory input. Besides tumors, there's other irritants that can be, bothering these organs, smooth muscle, or glands. Again, sending visceral sensory input. All right. Now let's go to this side here, motor. Right. So again, we can not only sense things from each of these things, but we can also ask them to move. So, for example, a good example of a somatomotor function is when you're at the gym and you are flexing your skeletal muscles, right? You are lifting weights and you're asking your skeletal muscle to move. And so that's a good one for somatomotor. What about visceral motor, right? That seems a little less intuitive to me. Like, how can you ask your organs to move, right? That also used to confuse me when I was learning this. But if you think about it, we actually do ask organs to move all the time. So let's think about the heart, right? If I'm exercising, I want my heart to move faster. I want my heart rate to go up. Or if I'm just relaxing, then I can have my heart rate go down. Same thing if you eat a giant meal. This is your stomach here. If you eat a giant meal, maybe we need our stomach to work a little bit harder. So again, we would send a visceromotor input from our brain to our stomachs through this physical wire, right? It's literally this physical wire that's just sending information from the brain to our stomach saying, "Hello, stomach, please work a little bit harder." All right, cool. So this is sort of the four main functions of a nerve. So before we end, I just want to clarify, does a nerve do one of these things? Does it do two of these things? Or does it do all of these things? And the answer is sometimes some nerves just do one, some nerves do two, some nerves do three, and some nerves do all four of these things. So I'm going to introduce a new word here, just because A, people use it all the time, so it's just good to know the terminology, and B, it might even help make sense of this, and that's called a nerve fiber. So if you hear the term nerve fiber, a nerve fiber is a fiber that's within a nerve. So let's go back to this picture, right? The reason I like this picture so much is that because of this. So if this is a nerve right here, right? This is your nerve. Then this yellow part over here is a fiber. A fiber is a part of a nerve, okay? And you have another fiber here and another fiber here. So this would be an example of a nerve with three fibers. And each fiber specifies in one function only. So a fiber will always specify in just one of these functions, either somatosensory or viscerosensory or somatomotor or visceromotor, right? These are your four options. So a fiber always does one of those functions, but a nerve, because a nerve can have 1 plus fibers, so a nerve can have 1 plus fibers, right? A nerve is made of many nerve fibers. That's how a nerve is able to have more than one function. So I used to think, nerve and nerve fiber were sort of interchangeable, but they're actually, it's a small subtle difference. But this is I love this image right here. Whenever I think of nerves, I imagine this visual because it reminds me that it's this wire with these fibers and each fiber specifying in one thing.